Hello, welcome back to another installment of Stigma-Free Learning Live with the Stigma-Free Society. As always, I am your host of this bi-weekly Facebook and YouTube live event. My name is Samara Liberman. The pronouns that I use are she and her, and I am a programs manager at the Stigma-Free Society. I am also the creator of all of the lesson plans and downloadable resources that are housed on our Student Mental Health Toolkit. And the purpose of this live event is to walk you through those resources and to give educators a bit of background on the content in those resources and some practical ways that you can implement the lesson plans in your classrooms. So I'm very excited to have you here. If you're new, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. It's great to have you. Our viewership is so exciting, and we always love getting feedback from you on ways that we can improve not only this live event, but also our lesson plans and any of the content that you find on the Student Mental Health Toolkit. So we are really excited to have your feedback. Like I said, any feedback that you have for us, be that positive or negative, we're willing to hear it. We're open to hearing it. Any feedback is great, and we are constantly trying to make sure that our resources are curated for you, who are the people who are using them. So if you're an educator, school counselor, parent, guardian, caregiver, anyone accessing our content, we want these resources to be made for you. So if you have any suggestions about content areas that you would like to see, any suggestions about topics or ways that we can improve our lesson plans, we are always open to that feedback. So please, if you're on the Student Mental Health Toolkit, there's a little feedback tab on the side. You can click on that and give us your feedback there. You can also leave a comment or a question or anything in the comments of this video, and I will be reading your comments and answering questions in the chat. So please interact with this as much as you would like, and we're so excited to have you here. So before we get into the content for today, I'm going to give you a bit of background on me and on the Stigma-Free Society if you are a new viewer. So as I said, my name is Samara Liberman, and I am a programs manager at SFS. I also have a bachelor's degree in equity studies, I have a master's in teaching, and I have a professional development certification in early years mental health. So that's a bit of background on me. And then as for the Stigma-Free Society, SFS is a decade-old Canadian registered charity that works to reduce and eliminate stigma of all kinds, with a particular focus on the stigma around mental health. So all of the content that we have really focuses on the intersections of different forms of stigma, but really kind of always ties it back to mental health and ways that we can support the mental health of our community, primarily our youth. We also have resources for rural folks, so anything that you want to view on our websites, please feel free to check them out. And now we're going to get into the lesson for today. So I'm going to be talking you through a lesson plan that is for grades 8 to 12. So it's for the teen section of the Student Mental Health Toolkit. So if you are an educator anywhere in that age group, so anyone from grades 8 to grades 12, this is a perfect lesson plan for you. It is the one that is the complementary lesson plan to the one we did last week for grades 4 to 7, which was about empathy. So this is another empathy related lesson plan, but this one is a science lesson. So it's the science of empathy. So if you are following along on the Student Mental Health Toolkit, if you go to the Teens Corner, you will find this lesson in the 8 to 12 section under the lesson plans and downloadable resources section of the toolkit. So the curriculum areas that this covers is science, and then specifically the Science for Citizens curriculum competencies for the grades 11 and 12. So after grade 10, the science curriculum branches off into different sections of science. So if you are a Science for Citizens teacher, this lesson is perfect for you. So if you teach 11 and 12 Science of Citizens science, please use this lesson in your classroom. It's specifically targeted for you, but it also does connect to content curriculum areas for the grades 8, 9, and 10 science curriculum as well. So to begin, we always go with the lesson overview, the purpose of the lesson. So the purpose of this lesson is really to review the concept of empathy with your students in a new and innovative way. where they'll see the impact of empathy firsthand. So I think that, empathy it plays a pivotal role in reducing and eliminating stigma. As it says in the outline of this lesson, empathy is a powerful tool for social change, but also for creating deeper connections with people in our lives. So empathy is a word that is kind of tossed around a lot these days, as I said in the other live event that I did about empathy. And I think creating and fostering empathy in our students is a really impactful tool to reducing and eliminating stigma, because the whole purpose of empathy is kind of being able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And when we're able to do that, it's a lot easier to kind of relate to their lived experience or empathize with their experience. And when we have that kind of personal connection, or we're able to put ourselves in their shoes, we can see that we're not so different from them. And, we shouldn't be necessarily judging based on any preconceptions we have about them and their identities. So developing deep empathy for others can help to break down our misconceptions and see people more holistically. So that's kind of the purpose of this lesson. So then diving into the body of the lesson, kind of the meat and potatoes of the lesson, if you will. The curriculum competencies for this lesson plan, as I said, pull from the science curriculum and focus primarily on the Science for Citizens curriculums for grades 11 and 12. So that's a really cool kind of avenue to talk about science. So it's not just about, experiments and science from the way that we think about it. It's also how we can relate to science from the perspective of, being citizens of the world and being citizens of our community. So I really like this piece of the BC curriculum, the Science for Citizens aspect. I think it's really a really cool way to tie in some different ideas about science that we might not normally think about when we are thinking about the science curriculum. So as I said, the Science for Citizens curriculum deeply connects to the purpose of this lesson, as it highlights how students can use science to practice meaningful citizenship and connect with the world in a different way. So the first thing that you are going to do for this lesson is queue up the video that's in the lesson plan, and the video provides an entry point to this lesson, and it also illustrates the activity that the students are going to be participating in later in the lesson. So it's a really great video. It's very engaging, it's very age appropriate and accessible, and it kind of walks students through the activity that they're going to be doing later on in the lesson, which is kind of this empathy and science experiment that they're going to do with partners. So when I found this video, I was really excited because it fits so perfectly with this lesson, and it really grounds the concepts that I was hoping to put forth with the creation of this lesson. So in this video, you will see pairs of people playing what's called the Ultimatum Game. So this game is designed to cultivate a sense of empathy between the pair, as one person decides how much they want to share with the other person from a pot of money. So it's a really cool way to kind of be able to predict the other person's emotions and kind of get a read on what they might want, what they might need. And your students are going to have the opportunity to practice this in the active component of this lesson. So once the students have watched the video, explaining the activity to them will be easy because they've already seen it being done by the folks in the video. And the guiding questions that you will pose after watching this video are intended to get your students thinking more deeply about what exactly empathy is and the impact that empathy can have on our interpersonal relationships. So they will begin by thinking about the times when they have practiced empathy in their lives, as well as how the experiment in the video has shifted their perspective on empathy. So these guiding questions are really intended to be kind of like a minds-on for the lesson plan and kind of get your students thinking about the subject that they're kind of diving into in the lesson. And in this context, it's a great way for them to start thinking about how they conceptualize empathy, examples of empathy in their everyday lives, and how empathy is connected to the video that they just watched and the activity they're going to participate in. So next, you will be discussing empathy on a deeper level with your class. So make sure when you're doing this to highlight the difference between sympathy and empathy. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they are quite different. So as it's noted in the video, sympathy is feeling for someone and empathy is feeling with someone. So those are very different concepts, and it's important to highlight that with your class. So while sympathy can often elicit feelings of pity, empathy is a great way to create a sense of connection. So that is kind of the biggest difference between these two concepts, and why we are focusing on empathy rather than sympathy, because we don't want people to feel like we are pitying them. We want people to feel like we are understanding them and kind of being able to put ourselves in their shoes and feel what they're feeling, without actually having the same experience that they have. So a key feature to focus on from this video is that humans practice empathy all the time with our friends and loved ones, but can be a harder thing to practice empathy with strangers or people that we fundamentally disagree with on certain issues. So, as we see in the world today, there's a very big divide in how people perceive things and how people see the world and how people see different sides of different issues, and having empathy for people who kind of sit on the other side of an argument can be really, really challenging. But having empathy for other people's experience and why they might feel the way they feel is a great way to create connection, to facilitate open dialogue and conversations where people feel comfortable, and can really be kind of the Kickstarter for social change. So you will get your students then to think more deeply about instances where they have seen empathy in action. So as outlined in the lesson, these can be small instances of empathy, such as, crying in a movie. That is an example of empathy. If we're feeling for the characters really strongly, we might have an emotional response to what they're experiencing. Or a deeper experience of empathy, such as feeling profoundly the suffering of somebody else in a conversation about their mental health. So you can have your students share these stories with their classmates in small groups, or you can facilitate a whole group discussion about these personal connections with empathy that they've seen or had or witnessed. So for the active part of the lesson, like I said, they are going to be playing the Ultimatum Game with each other. So this is a really great way to kind of put all of these concepts into action, so kind of taking theory and putting it into practice. So for the active part of the lesson, your students are playing the Ultimatum Game. They can use any objects they find in the classroom instead of money for the purposes of playing in the classroom context. Obviously, it's probably not the best idea to be using actual money for this activity, but as noted in the lesson outline, even if the objects they have don't have the same stakes as money necessarily, for the purposes of the lesson, it all remains the same. Like the purpose of the lesson remains the same, the purpose of the activity remains the same. So they should treat these objects as if they have the same equivalent value as money or some other treasured item or object that has really great value to them. So when they're split off into their partners and you can kind of decide how you think these pairings should go, they can decide who will go first, but they will each have the opportunity to be in both positions of this game. So to include some scientific inquiry in this experiment, in this activity, have your students make predictions about how much of the object they think their partner will offer to them in this game. So this is a way to kind of bring that scientific inquiry and that kind of hypothesis, making that prediction, and then kind of seeing the results of the experiment into action. So you will see an experiment outline document in this lesson plan. So you can print that out, give one to each student, and have them fill it out before they start engaging in the experiment. So they should each take turns in each role, as I said. You can also do this activity as many times as you see fit, or for as much time as you have. Like I said, they can switch partners up. They can kind of, do this as many times as they want if they're really engaged with it. The outcome of this experiment might be different based on the different relationships that they have in each pairing. So that's another thing too to consider, is if you have a set of friends that are doing this activity, it might have a different result than if they are not as close, or if they have a different kind of relationship. So mixing up the pairings and mixing up the partners is a really great way to kind of see if the outcome of the experiment is different based on the relationships that the students have with each other in each pairing. So have your students share the outcome of these experiences with each other, and have them explain their rationale and why they were able to tap into the other person's possible reaction when they were making their decision. So one of the ways that you can kind of engage with this lesson on a deeper level is by having that conversation around, like, what made you choose to kind of to offer this amount of money? What reaction did you think it would elicit? And kind of facilitate that whole group conversation about how the experiment went, what the empathy connection was for them, how they were kind of able to put themselves in the shoes of their partner and think, what might this person want from me in terms of the division of this object. So then at the very end of the lesson, for the lesson closure, discuss with your class how empathy is a powerful tool within our relationships, but also, like I said, as a tool for social change. When we foster empathy for other people, we are creating the space for other people's needs and feelings based on their experiences. This is something that can create stronger relationships with each other and in our interpersonal relationships, in our lives, as well as in the world at large. So this can also greatly impact mental health of the people that we interact with by showing them that we see them and we respect their needs. So like I said, empathy is a really powerful tool for social change and also a really great way to support others' mental health. So when we are having conversations that are really hard about mental health challenges, being able to empathize with somebody else's experience, even if we can't necessarily relate on a personal level, it can really help develop stronger relationships. So I always say kind of put the empathy foot forward first and listen to people from an empathetic spot, an empathetic place. Before you try to step in, just kind of have that empathy for their experience and for what they're sharing with you. And this is a really important point to kind of drive home with your students through this lesson. So that's it. That's the content for today. I hope you found it helpful. As always, please feel free to leave a comment or a question about today's lesson or about any of the other live events that you've watched, or ways that we can improve, or other content you might want to see that is similar to this or different from this, relating to mental health or stigma in general. Like I said, we're really open to that feedback and really, really love to hear from you as our audience. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in 2 weeks with another Stigma-Free Learning Live. Thank you.